Hello, and welcome to the 60 for 30 project. My name is Xander Miller, and I'm sitting with Selena Jaramillo. Selena, how are you doing?
I'm doing well today. How are you?
I'm doing great. So let's go ahead and get right into it. So what neighborhood are you from, or what area did you grow up in Kenosha?
So I grew up with my mom, and she lived in the McKinley Middle School area, which is unfortunately no longer McKinley Middle School, basically right across from 39th. And I also grew up in closer to Lincoln area as well, when I saw my dad once in a while. So over there, I'm trying to think, I'm so bad with streets, but it's over there in the Lincoln area. There's like a jail somewhere around there. So right in that neighborhood by the train tracks.
And that's where you currently are as well, or no?
No, so I actually just moved back to Wisconsin.
Oh, welcome back.
Thank you. I lived in California for 3 years, and I'm currently actually in Milwaukee.
Okay.
So I'll be commuting to teach back in Kenosha this year.
Okay. So really, you grew up here. You went, you moved, then you came back. Or,
right.
Well, you live in Milwaukee, you work here.
Yes.
So you came back, you're bringing back.
Yes,
okay.
yes.
So, how have you experienced Kenosha's culture, or what is Kenosha's culture to you?
I guess growing up, I'm a child of the 90s, so I feel like those, for me, were the good times, being able to go to Big Star. My cousins lived over by Washington Bowl, so that was the perfect summer kind of culture, was to go to Lencey's, get a pickle, and then go to Washington Bowl, go to Big Star. The culture, I guess, a lot of it was family, very family oriented, very friends oriented. Didn't have a lot of access to technology then, so I was always outside, always in the neighborhood. It was nice where my dad lived, close to the Lincoln area, because we had such a diverse community, and there'd be cookouts. Like my dad's side is Mexican, so they would make tortillas, and we'd have a black family right next door, and they would have a barbecue, so we would trade off food. So that was kind of the cool piece of being able to see different parts of Kenosha, because there is so much diversity within it if you're able to see those parts.
Yeah. So you've experienced kind of a good sense of togetherness between people within your own family, as well as outside your family, exchanging meals while you had different settings.
Yes.
Okay. So what was it, along with that, what was it like growing up through, that setting in Kenosha? And you're talking the 90s, how has the rest of growing up been for you here?
I mean, for me particularly, as a biracial person, so my mom's white, my dad is Mexican, it was very complicated. I lost a lot of my language, so my Spanish, when I was younger, because I no longer kept in communication with my father. So that was really difficult. I really struggled here in Kenosha to be able to find, okay, so where do I belong in the culture of Kenosha? Do I fit in with, mi gente, my Mexican people, or do I fit in more with my white side? And I never really could fit into either side because of the way I look. I'm not dark enough, but I'm also not white enough. So I think for me that was a little bit of a struggle, as well as not having the Spanish. So that was part of the reason actually why I ended up leaving Kenosha, moving to California to kind of find myself, find my identity, and then hopefully be able to be confident in who I am, come back to my community, and really give back.
Yeah, what has coming back been like since you've went and did what you needed to do to find your identity, and now you're back. So what's it like now that you're back?
So I mean, it's definitely been a transition because I've only been back for 3 weeks. But I graduated from school my undergrad, and then I did teach here in Kenosha for 2 years at McKinley Middle School.
Okay.
And then after that, that's when I left. That was when I felt like I need to find myself. So coming back so far has been feeling really good, just because I do feel more centered and grounded in who I am. Mm-hmm. My relationship with my father is a lot better, which is amazing. And so being able to be here now with that community and feel fully supported is something I'm really excited about, especially because I'll be teaching at Bradford High School. So a lot of the kids that I had at Bullen will now be 11th graders at Bradford. So I'm so excited for that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Mm-hmm. So you're going through part of your conflicting identity while you were a teacher as well.
Yes.
So how was teaching as well as considering your identity at the same time? What was that like here with students, looking up to you essentially?
Mm-hmm. Here, I guess I would say it was pretty challenging. I did feel like, there's not much representation of teachers of color in our schools. Mm-hmm. And as a teacher of color in the schools, I felt very isolated. And I think that was something that I really struggled with navigating, was how do I fit into the culture of the school, as well as stay true to who I am in my own identity and support the students at the same time, especially when working with students of color who we already know are incredibly marginalized in our school systems across the country. Mm-hmm. So that for me was part of why felt like I needed to move to California, just to get a different perspective. I thought California has it together, like they've got everything going on. That's not true. It's not true. So I went there and taught, and still found the same barriers, found the same isolation, struggled to support myself, struggled to support my students of color, and then I ended up going to grad school and just graduated last week, actually.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So the goal, hopefully, down the line is to go back and get my PhD and be able to start a teacher ed program where we can get students from Kenosha Unified to become teachers, mm-hmm. so that we really can see our community thriving in that way, that we really can see representation for students for generations to come.
Yeah, and that sounds, part of that sounds like it's how it's important for students to see themselves in their teachers too, whether that's they live in Kenosha or they look like you, or mm-hmm. or keep have similar racial profiles, essentially.
Right.
That sounds like some of the work that you'd be supporting is mm-hmm. what you'd be going for.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So how would you compare, you said you had some of the same issues when you moved to California as you did in Kenosha. How would you compare those two different experiences? Because that's half the country away, right. And you're saying that you've had some of the same problems. Mm-hmm. So how would you compare the two?
I guess I'm trying to think. So here in Kenosha, I would say a lot of it was there wasn't so much a focus on restorative justice in our schools. A lot of students getting expelled, a lot of students suspended, and same thing, over there. However, I think over there was a huge wake-up call because I lived in San Diego, mm-hmm. closer to the border. A lot of my students who were undocumented never saw the ocean, and we were 20 minutes from the ocean because their families were afraid to get on the highway. The other thing too was within my classroom, I had undocumented students, and I had students whose parents were Border Patrol. And so their parents were the students were so proud of their parents being Border Patrol that they would, share it openly. But then I would have students who were afraid to be in the classroom with those other students. And so that was an experience that I had, coming from the Midwest, where we're far away from the border that I really hadn't confronted fully. But at the same time, here it's a little more hidden. Mm-hmm. Over there you can see it a little more, but here when I was working in the schools, of course we have students who don't have documentation, and they were afraid. They were definitely afraid, and I think especially after 2016, the election, that spiked an increase of feeling fear for their families, for themselves. So I think that has been the biggest thing that I've really noticed. However, I will say in San Diego, predominantly it's Latinx community. So there isn't much diversity outside of whether you're white or Latinx, where I was, at least in my area. Mm-hmm. Over here, there is a lot more diversity because we have Chicago, we have Milwaukee, we have like a lot, I don't know, it just felt for me here more diverse, which is really interesting. You'd think, going to California, it would feel more, I don't know, it was definitely an interesting experience.
It's more, it seems, monolithic than it is here, you'd say.
Yes. In terms of identity, mm-hmm. I would say, but not in terms of language.
Okay.
There's definitely a lot more variants of languages.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So I know you mentioned that here that you've had undocumented students, has been, it's like that's kind of hidden or not talked about. Mm-hmm. Could you, talk about it more? What has been the feeling that you've been able to perceive in Kenosha when it comes to, citizenship or documentation status?
Yeah. I felt like there's not a lot of resources out there to know what to do. And I mean, when I first started here at KUSD, I was very young. I'm still very young, but that was almost 5 years ago. And I had no idea what to do when I would have, students come to me and tell me that they're afraid. And I wasn't sure, what are the policies at school? I mean, I do know, they don't have to give any identification, anything like that to the schools. But in terms of resources, there wasn't anything readily available. There weren't people in the school all the time that could speak Spanish, that could support our students. And I remember just researching. ACLU was like my best friend at that point to try to find their rights and to be able to print everything out and just tuck it in their backpack and bring it home so they knew what to do if ICE ever came to their door, so that they could share it with their families in both English and in Spanish. So that was something that was interesting, like having to try to navigate that on my own. And of course, within my own family, within my own community, I do know people that are undocumented and the real struggles that they face in all aspects of our community that we don't necessarily talk about. And those people bring so much to this community when we look at the jobs that they have that are in the factories, right? Like all of the goods, all of the foods, a lot of, that's where a lot of people are doing that hard labor that we need. So I'm hoping, we can come together as a community, Kenosha, to really support that community because they are such an asset to our community here.
Yeah. How would you like to see that support here?
I think organizing. I did go to a protest several years back here when they were separating families at the border, and we saw a lot of incredibly horrendous things, kids in cages. We did have a protest here downtown at the lakefront that I went to, and I brought my huge, it's called a friendship flag. It's a Mexican and US flag basically combined that I hang up every year in my classroom. But I brought that down to the lake, And it was cool to see the diversity within that space. However, such a small group. You know, you go to Milwaukee, it's a huge turnout for people coming through. Mm-hmm. Go to Chicago, huge turnout. I really want to see Kenosha come together and really stand in solidarity with one another, not just for the undocumented folks, but for our Black folks. You know, I know, especially after this past year, I was away when everything happened with Jacob Blake, and just watching that on the news of what was happening here in the city, but really seeing or hoping that we can have that cross-cultural and cross-identity solidarity. That's really my goal.
So it's like everyone's supporting everyone.
Yeah.
Is kind of more what you like to see.
Yeah, because it's like we can't, if one of us is suffering, we all suffer in one way, you know, in one way or another, eventually. So really making sure that we can see that, and that's actually my work with my students. I really truly believe that education plays such a crucial role in improving the human condition, basically helping students through the content to see the suffering that's in our communities, but also to see the joy, to see what our cultures bring to Kenosha. And that's why I really wanted to come back after I felt confident in who I am, confident in my work as an educator, to be in the classroom with students and support them in not only seeing themselves in the curriculum, but also seeing what they can do for this community. Because just by showing up at school, they're doing so much for our community. And I want them to be able to recognize that and hopefully then bring that outside and see how they can be civically engaged. So that's what my goal will be this year as well.
It's like that's your, you know, people talk about their magnum opus project. It's like yours is you want to see kids grow up being true to themselves.
Yes.
And then true to their communities too.
Yes. Yes.
Wonderful. So you mentioned how you've been away during the past year, and you know, the shooting of Jacob Blake happened, you were away. What was it like being in California at the time and seeing that?
Honestly, it was really difficult. I had a lot of friends on the front lines in the protests, and so watching from their live cams, I saw the shooting of Kyle Rittenhouse. The folks that I was watching their live were there and running from that. So seeing that was like, I felt like I was like, I need to come back. Like, I need to be here. Like, why am I not here? And I think the thing that got me the most was seeing the kids running downtown. So they knew there was going to be a protest downtown, and I saw just Facebook feeds of high school students, middle school students just running downtown. And I was terrified because I was like, well, who's looking out for them? How are we supporting them? And that was the summer, correct?
Yeah, that was last summer.
That was the summer. How are we supporting students before an event like that happens so that they know how to navigate that space, right? Because anything can happen, and clearly it did, right? People were murdered during the protest. So really, that's also what I want to bring into my work as an educator is these tragedies are going to come up. They're going to happen, and how can we help students process what's happening in our communities, but also making sure that they, and I don't want to like control, you know, how they choose to protest, because how they choose to protest is how they choose. Their anger is valid however it shows up. But I do want to help them finding their voice in that. And so I think that was something that came up for me during the shooting of Jacob Blake, and then the aftermath of everything was how is KUSD supporting our kids right now and the family, right? Because Jacob Blake's kids were KUSD students.
Yep.
So how are we standing up and, you know, supporting them, but then really teaching what's happening in our communities. Yeah.
Now I can even see all the pieces are coming together to inform who you are as a teacher, because now you did come back, and this school year is the summer after, essentially, or the year after. Now you get to see what some of those results are.
Right.
So, say 5-10 years from now, what exactly is it that you would like to see as some of the results of your work as a teacher, or just in Kenosha in general?
I really want to see, like I said, that solidarity. I am excited to be back, to start building connections. Nonprofits working together, other community organizations. The work that you're doing right now is so important in this. And that's what I'm hoping, is that I can find those spaces, because I feel like in the past, I felt isolated, I felt alone. But now that I, have more connections, hoping to find more connections, that we can kind of stand in solidarity as adults, so then hopefully trickle that down to our students, so that students are able to see, oh, they know each other, oh, like they're from my hood, like, oh, that my teacher knows that organization, that's so cool, like that's what I want Kenosha to be, is I really want it to be. Right now I feel like there's just so many different neighborhoods, like, oh, you're from that area, oh, you're from that area, oh, like, you know what I mean? Like that's always how it's been. So I went to McKinley Middle School, and it's shut down now, which I don't know if you know much about that, but I was so frustrated with that, because now it's a charter school. It was a public school, and they shut it down for whoever, whatever reasons. We probably already know why they shut it down. But that's my hood. Like that was my school, and I want us as a community to get out of our bubble, to get out of our own areas, to really see each other and see what's happening in the community. Not just the suffering, because we know every community has a lot of that, right? But really to see the joy, the traditions, the music, like, just the foods, like sharing the meals, like that's so important. That's what my goal really is too, because I'm also a yoga teacher. I do social emotional learning. I have a certification in social emotional learning. My goal also is to bring wellness into the school space, and that's something that I want to do as well within the community, is maybe provide like a community healing space where there's access to a community garden, where there's access to just learn about different herbs that we can grow here. I don't know, that's kind of my dream. And it would be so amazing if I could somehow get that supported by students, or connected to the school district, as well as other community organizations that we can have all year, where people will have access to things like yoga. Because if you go to California, everybody knows, has kind of, you see what yoga is. Wellness is pretty, of course, wellness is a very commodified thing nowadays, right?
Yeah.
But how can we make it not that, and make it accessible for every single person in this community, so that all of us can thrive, really? So that's what I hope 5 to 10 years I can find my way to that, with education, with my students and their families, to be able to say, well, this is what I need for wellness, right? Because my idea of wellness and my idea of thriving is very different from person to person, cultural identity to cultural identity, or any identity really. So that's hopefully got big dreams.
Yeah. There's a lot you can see potentially happening in 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
So is there anything that we missed just in conversation, or anything else that you'd like to say to the Kenosha community at large, or Kenosha leadership, what would that be? What would you like to say?
Maybe just the biggest thing is love one another, look out for one another, and really invest in our schools, invest in all of our schools, in all of our students, in all of our communities, so that everybody in Kenosha has access to what they need to make this community even better. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much for sitting down with me. This was wonderful to hear.
Thank you so much.